The millionaire wanted to get rid of his autistic son, but a police dog shocked everyone. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. Ethan had light blonde hair, almost white, and blue eyes that seemed lost in a world few could understand. Ethan was autistic and didn't speak. His world was built on routines, textures, soft sounds, and loneliness. His father, James Carter, a wealthy businessman with a stone-cold face and an icy voice, walked down the hallway with a steady stride. He never looked to the sides. He never looked at Ethan. To him, the boy was a biological mistake, a burden left behind by a wife who died giving him life. The memory of the woman he loved only fueled his resentment toward the child she left behind. "Is he still on the floor?" James asked, irritation clear in his voice, addressing the nanny. "Mr. Carter, Ethan hasn't wanted to get up today. He's feeling a bit more sensitive," replied Mrs. Margaret or Maggie, an older woman with a kind heart who had been the only steady source of love in the boy's life. "Sensitive? That boy needs discipline, not pity," James snapped, his brow furrowed, not even glancing at her. Maggie pressed her lips together, holding back tears. She had raised Ethan since he was a baby, seen him laugh in his silent way, and felt in her heart that the boy held a vast world inside him. But her voice never carried weight against the father's. That night, James attended a dinner with business associates. He drank too much. The conversation turned cruel when one partner, laughing, said, "You still keep that defective kid at home, Carter? Come on, man, that's bad for your image." And that's when James made a decision. The next morning, without warning, a dark car pulled up in front of the mansion. Maggie was startled awake by the hurried footsteps of the staff. "What's going on?" she asked, alarmed. "Mr. Carter has decided to send the boy to an institution," the driver said coldly. "What? No, he can't," Maggie cried, racing up the stairs. She found Ethan clutching his stuffed seal, his only comfort, staring out the window as if he knew what was coming. "Don't worry, sweetheart, I won't let you go," Maggie whispered. But when she tried to stop the medical staff arriving, James appeared behind her. "You're fired, Maggie. As of today, Ethan will be in a specialized facility. It's what's best for everyone." Maggie trembled with rage but knew she had no legal power. She could only hug the boy one last time, slipping a small silver cross necklace into his pocket. "You're a wonderful boy. Never forget that," she whispered, as tears rolled down her cheeks. Ethan didn't cry. He just waited. The black vehicle moved slowly down a road lined with tall pine trees. Inside, Ethan stared at the cloudy sky through the window, clutching his stuffed seal tightly against his chest. He didn't cry. He never cried. His body rocked slightly, a gentle sway that calmed him, a reflection of his own inner language. No one in the front seat spoke. To them, he was just a fragile package. Their destination was the Willow Creek Center for Children with Special Needs, a private facility in a rural part of upstate New York. From the outside, it looked like an elite school. Wide gardens, spotless buildings, ivory-colored walls. Inside, it was a quiet haven for children forgotten by the world. When they arrived, Ethan was greeted by Dr. Sarah Bennett, a neuropsychologist with a soft voice and kind eyes. Young, with red hair, and originally from Ireland, Sarah had devoted her life to understanding the soul behind silence. "Hello, Ethan," she said gently, kneeling to his level. "Welcome. This will be your new home for a while. No one here will hurt you." Ethan didn't look at her. He kept rocking, holding his stuffed seal. Sarah wasn't offended. She just smiled, sensing a faint thread worth following. That same week, the center launched a pilot program, pairing children with communication challenges with retired service dogs from police units. Sarah was part of the team behind it, convinced that animals could break through barriers humans couldn't. In a nearby room, a Belgian Malinois rested quietly. His name was Max. He had served 8 years in search and rescue operations in Montana. After a failed mission where his human partner died in his presence, the dog became wary of adults. He only tolerated a few handlers. Still, his instincts remained sharp. "Are you sure about Max?" asked the center's trainer, a tall man named Mark. "That dog has been through things no human could imagine." "That's exactly why," Sarah replied. "Max doesn't trust words anymore. Maybe Ethan doesn't either." Their first meeting was cautious. In a plain white room with a soft carpet and faint Tibetan bowl music in the background, Max entered first. His steps were silent. When he saw the dog, Ethan froze. His body stopped moving, and his eyes locked on something for the first time in weeks. Max stopped too, as if he sensed something. There were no pets, no games, just two beings sharing the same space. Ethan started rocking again. Max lay down at a safe distance and closed his eyes. Sarah, watching through a one-way window, smiled with quiet excitement. She didn't need more. There was a connection. In the days that followed, the progress was quiet but profound. Max followed Ethan like a loyal shadow. He didn't touch him, just stayed close. And in that silent companionship, Ethan began to change. He stopped banging his head against the wall, something he did when overwhelmed. He started eating without being forced. He even made a sound, a kind of sigh, when Max lay beside him for the first time. One afternoon, while Ethan arranged wooden blocks on a table, Max nudged one with his nose. Ethan looked at him, straight at him, for 3 seconds. Then something new, a faint smile like a barely noticeable sunrise. "Did you see that?" Sarah exclaimed to Mark, tears in her eyes. "He's waking up." Max didn't wag his tail. He just kept his eyes on the boy. He had found his purpose. A new life, serving another broken soul. On an autumn morning, with the air filled with the scent of dry leaves and damp earth, Dr. Sarah Bennett walked through the Willow Creek Center's garden, holding a notebook. She watched Ethan from a distance. The boy sat on the grass, completely focused on lining up pebbles by size. Beside him, Max watched with a calm, almost sacred stillness, like a guardian of a holy place. "I've never seen anything like it," said Mark, the trainer, approaching with a coffee in hand. "That dog used to hate being near anyone. Now it's like he lives for him." Sarah nodded, her eyes still on the boy. "It's like they can read each other without words. Like they see the cracks in each other's hearts," she whispered. Days passed, and Ethan began exploring new parts of the center. He walked with Max through the hallways, pausing to watch shadows cast by the windows, and sometimes, for brief moments, let Sarah sit beside him without pulling away. There was trust, fragile but real. One Friday afternoon, the center held a small group activity in the main room. Only 5 children would attend, each with their service dog. Sarah hesitated to include Ethan. It would be his first time facing more stimuli, more people, more noise. "I'm not sure he's ready," she said to Mark as they set up the room. "We don't know if he'll ever be ready, Sarah. Sometimes miracles don't give warnings," Mark replied. Ethan arrived with a therapist, holding a sensory cube with soft textures that calmed him. Max walked by his side, alert. When they entered the room, Ethan stopped suddenly. His breathing quickened. He looked at the other kids, at the dogs barking playfully. It was too much. Max sensed the change. He turned slowly and pressed his nose against Ethan's leg. That was all. That simple touch was enough. Ethan lowered his head, closed his eyes, and took a step forward. For 10 minutes, he just moved around the room, not looking at anyone. But he didn't leave. He stayed. Then something unexpected happened. An older boy accidentally bumped into Ethan, knocking him to his knees. It wasn't on purpose, but the impact broke Ethan's focus. He started hitting the floor with both hands, his eyes blank, trapped in a sensory overload. Several adults rushed over, but Max acted first. He stepped forward with purpose and lay across Ethan's legs, applying gentle pressure with his body. It was an emotional grounding technique service dogs sometimes used instinctively. Max had never been trained for it, but he did it. Ethan's trembling body slowly relaxed. His hands stopped hitting the floor, his shoulders eased. And then, in the heavy silence, Ethan lifted his hand and placed it on Max's back. It was the first time he had chosen to touch someone. Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. Several therapists were crying too. Mark, moved, muttered, "That dog. He knows more about life than most people." After the activity, Ethan refused to let go of Max. He walked with him to his room, and for the first time since arriving at the center, he let them take off his shoes without resisting. That night, he slept without needing his stuffed seal. Max was there, and that was enough. By late November, when the trees were bare and the cold began to frost the windows of the Willow Creek Center, Dr. Sarah Bennett received unexpected news. James Carter, Ethan's father, had requested an in-person visit. The news hit like a bucket of ice water. "He wants to come here?" Sarah asked, torn between surprise and unease. "Yes, he didn't give clear reasons," the center's director replied. "He just said he needs to see if the treatment is worth what he's paying." Sarah pressed her lips together. She sensed there was another motive, something darker, but she couldn't deny him access. The day came. James arrived in a sleek, black sedan, dressed impeccably in a wool coat and dark sunglasses, his face showing no trace of curiosity or warmth. He walked through the center like he was inspecting a property for sale. Sarah greeted him with cool politeness and led him to an observation room with a window looking into the sensory room, where Ethan played with translucent blocks under soft light. Max lay beside him, as always. "That's my son?" James asked dryly, with only a flicker of interest in his voice. "Yes, he's much more settled since he arrived. He's tolerating contact better. He's stopped hurting himself, and most importantly, he's formed a strong bond with his companion," Sarah said. James narrowed his eyes. "With that dog?" "With that dog," Sarah replied firmly. James didn't respond. He stood, watching. Max lifted his head and stared at him, unmoving. There was something unsettling in the dog's gaze, a look that demanded truth. James looked away. "Can I talk to him?" he asked. "Ethan doesn't respond to commands or direct prompts, but if you want to try, you can go in. Just stay calm and respect his space," Sarah said. James nodded impatiently. The door opened and James stepped inside. Ethan didn't turn. He kept arranging his blocks. Max, however, stood slowly and positioned himself between them, his eyes fixed on the visitor. James crouched near the boy, keeping a careful distance. "Ethan, I'm your dad," he said, his voice strained, like he was reciting lines he didn't understand. Ethan didn't react. He kept sorting the blocks by color. James inched closer. "Do you hear me? I'm here to see you." Max took a step forward and let out a low growl. Not aggressive, but deep, controlled, full of warning. Not out of fear, but to protect. James stepped back. "What's wrong with this animal?" "Nothing's wrong with him. He's doing his job," Sarah said from the doorway. "Max can read emotions. If he's acting like that, it's because he senses something you're not showing." The silence grew heavy. James left the room without a word. But something in his face had shifted. A small crack, barely visible, but enough for Sarah to know his stone-cold facade wasn't unbreakable. Later that night, Sarah checked the center's financial records. Something caught her eye. James Carter had transferred an unusually large sum to the center, but he'd also made another move, a formal request to transfer Ethan to a more expensive facility in Canada. "Why would he want to move him now, when he's making progress?" Sarah muttered, alarmed. In the garden, Max sniffed the cold air. Suddenly he lifted his head and let out a soft whine into the darkness, as if sensing something approaching. Something they couldn't yet see, but he could feel. The days after James's visit were marked by a subtle but noticeable tension. Sarah noticed staff whispering among themselves, papers arriving without signatures, and administrative meetings starting to mention new terms: transfer, relocation, program termination. One morning in the staff dining room, Mark set a folder on the table, his face serious. "They're moving fast. It looks like James wants to pull Ethan out before Christmas. Says he has new treatment plans in Canada," he said. Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. "What about Max? Are they going to separate them?" "It doesn't say, but you know how these people think. To him, the dog's just a temporary tool," Mark replied. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She reviewed old recordings of Ethan's sessions. She saw him in his early days, rocking silently, locked in his own world. Then she saw his progress, lifting his head, picking up objects, looking into Max's eyes. The bond was undeniable. It wasn't chance, it was transformation. Meanwhile, in his room, Ethan slept soundly. Max lay beside him, ever watchful. But that night, the dog wasn't resting. His breathing was short. His body was alert. Something was off, and he was right. At 3 in the morning, a van with tinted windows parked quietly at the center's back entrance. 2 men in medical uniforms stepped out silently. They carried papers with official seals, but they weren't from the center's staff. One pulled out a phone and whispered, "We're here. The boy's in room 213. We have 10 minutes. They entered with master keys that didn't match any authorized copies. It was a clean, private operation, no witnesses, not a kidnapping, not legally. It was a transfer approved by the father. No discussion, no compassion. When they opened the door, Ethan was asleep in a fetal position, wrapped in his blue blanket. But Max was already standing. The men froze. "What's with the dog?" "I thought they'd remove it first," one said, annoyed. The other stepped forward. Max growled. "We don't have time. Move it," the man said. They tried to reach Ethan, but Max lunged, not biting, not attacking, just placing his body firmly between the men and the boy, fur bristling, teeth bared, a guttural sound echoing through the hallway. No alarm sounded, but Sarah did. Woken by a bad feeling, she saw the hallway light on from her window and ran. The men backed off. One, nervous, pulled out a stun baton. Get it out of the way. Before he could move closer, Sarah arrived. "Step away from him now," she shouted. "We have legal authorization," one man said, holding up the folder. "I have medical authority, and I promise you if you take another step, that dog will take you down," Sarah said. Max didn't budge, growling steadily, eyes locked on them. Ethan woke up, disoriented. He saw the men, saw Max protecting him. He didn't scream or cry. He just moved closer to the dog and hugged him. "Max," he whispered. It was barely audible, but it was his voice, for the first time. Sarah froze. The men did too. "Did you hear that?" she said, her eyes shining. "He said his name." The men lowered their heads, uneasy. They knew this changed everything. He wasn't just a silent boy anymore. He was a boy who spoke, a boy who fought back with what he had. They left without another word. Max relaxed but stayed by Ethan's side all night. When the sun rose, he was still awake, as if he knew the threat wasn't fully gone. News of the attempted transfer spread quickly among the center's staff. The director called an urgent meeting at dawn. Sarah was there, pale but determined. She placed a USB drive on the table, containing footage from the night before. The men entering without permission, Max's reaction, and the moment Ethan spoke his first word. "We can't ignore this," Sarah said firmly. "We can't let them separate him from that dog, not after everything they've achieved together." The director, a stern but fair woman, nodded slowly. "Mr. Carter has money, power, lawyers, but you have something he doesn't. The truth." Hours later, Sarah uploaded the video to a private social media account under the title, "The Boy Who Spoke Thanks to His Dog." No names, no locations, just the images telling their story. The video went viral within days. Thousands of comments poured in from therapists, parents, and caregivers of autistic children. Similar stories emerged. Local media requested interviews. A national news network asked to film a documentary about the bond between neurodivergent kids and service dogs. Meanwhile, James Carter was getting angry calls from his partners and PR team. His name wasn't in the video, but his circle suspected. He was the only one who could look bad in this story. "Who approved that video?" he shouted over the phone. "No names were used, sir. They can't sue us for it," his lawyer replied. "But everyone will know it's me." "That kid can't be the face of my family, understand?" James said. Silence. James hung up. His world was starting to crack, not from financial scandals, which he could handle, but from being challenged on a human level. And worst of all, it wasn't an adult. It was his own son, and a dog. He decided to take one last step. He returned to the center unannounced. When he arrived, the gate was locked, and Sarah was waiting at the entrance. "Mr. Carter, you should know that any move against Ethan without a court order will be reported as neglect and emotional abuse. We have lawyers, footage, witnesses, and a whole country watching," she said. James glared at her, his jaw tight with restrained anger. "That boy belongs to me. He doesn't belong to anyone. He's not an object or a family brand. He's a human being, and for the first time, he's thriving. You can keep destroying things, or you can, for once, do the right thing," Sarah said. Just then, Ethan appeared in the garden, wearing his blue sweater, walking with Max. He carried a box in his hands. He stopped when he saw his father. He didn't hide or run. He just looked at him. James looked back. For a moment, he truly saw him, not as a burden or a punishment, but as a boy. His boy. There was a purity in Ethan's gaze that James had forgotten existed. Ethan lifted the box and pulled out a drawing. It was rough, with uneven lines but clear. Ethan, Max, and a tall man in the background. No face, just there. James took it, his hands shaking. "This is for me?" Ethan didn't speak, but nodded slightly. Max sat beside the boy, not looking at James. His presence said enough. James closed his eyes. For the first time, he lowered his head. "I won't take him away," he murmured, barely audible. "If he's better here, I'll step back." Sarah watched him cautiously, but with a hint of hope. That's a start. The days that followed were calm, but filled with a different kind of silence. Not the heavy, painful kind, but one full of presence, like the rustle of leaves in the wind, where words aren't needed to feel life. Ethan showed signs of progress that amazed even the most seasoned therapists. He started recognizing pictures on cards and linking them to words. He didn't just say Max anymore. He whispered words like light and cold and once Mom. While looking at an old photo Sarah had found in his medical file, it showed a young woman with a gentle face holding a baby, the mother he never knew. Max, always by his side, seemed to understand more than any human. When Ethan got upset, the dog pressed his body gently against him. When Ethan withdrew, Max just followed, never pushing. It was as if their hearts beat in sync. One December afternoon, with snow starting to dust the center's roofs, Sarah organized a small Christmas celebration for the kids. It was quiet, no bright lights or loud music, just a fireplace, soft candies and carols played on a piano, all designed to keep the children calm. Ethan was one of the first to arrive, wearing a scarf knitted by Maggie, his former nanny, who had sent him gifts and letters since being let go. He held a cardboard star he'd made with Sarah's help, wanting to hang it on the tree. "Want to put it up yourself?" Sarah asked, kneeling down. Ethan nodded. He walked slowly, Max at his side. The dog watched the star as if he understood its meaning. When Ethan hung it on a low branch, the room went quiet, not by rule but out of respect. Then, something unexpected happened. James Carter walked into the room. He wore simpler clothes than usual, no fancy coat or strong cologne. He moved slowly, unsure, holding a box. Sarah looked at him, surprised. She hadn't expected him. "Can I stay for a bit?" he asked without arrogance. Sarah nodded, saying nothing. James approached Ethan, who was sitting on a blanket, coloring with thick crayons. Max looked at him but didn't growl, just watched carefully. "Hey, Ethan," James said softly. "I brought something that was yours, or at least your mum's." He opened the box. Inside was a small wooden piano, old with worn but real keys. Sarah recognized it from Ethan's medical file. It was something he'd played with as a baby. Ethan stared at it. His eyes grew wet, but he didn't cry. He reached out slowly, touched a key, and smiled. Sarah felt her chest tighten. James sat at a safe distance, saying nothing more. Max lay between them, like a living bridge. That night, after the celebration, Ethan didn't want to leave right away. He grabbed his crayons and drew 3 figures on a sheet: a boy, a dog, and a man with an outstretched hand. Sarah leaned over to see the drawing. "Who's this?" she asked gently. Ethan didn't answer. He just pressed a key on the piano, like a final note. And in that moment, Sarah knew redemption didn't always come with words. Sometimes it was enough to stay and not run. Winter settled firmly over upstate New York. The Willow Creek Center's windows woke up covered in frost, and the bare trees offered their branches to the falling snow. It was a season of stillness, as if the world had slowed to match Ethan's quiet, sacred transformation. The boy who had arrived silent, avoiding touch, his gaze lost in an unreachable world, now walked the hallways with steady steps, his blonde hair messy, a notebook always in hand. He drew constantly, landscapes, shapes, sequences. He didn't talk much, but he wrote simple words under his pictures: calm, light, Max, Dad. Sarah kept every drawing like they were masterpieces. They were, not for their skill, but because they were windows into a soul that had been sealed shut for so long. One afternoon, during a private session in the sensory room, Sarah noticed something curious. Ethan laid out cards with facial expressions and, without help, identified sadness, fear, joy, and guilt. Then he took a card with the word sorry and placed it in front of her. "Is this for me?" Sarah asked gently. Ethan shook his head. Then, with total focus, he drew a dog facing a man walking away and wrote beneath it, "He feels." Sarah understood. It wasn't just Ethan healing. James was changing too, slowly, clumsily, but genuinely. Days later, James returned to the center. This time, he didn't ask for meetings or talk to staff. He came with a decision already made. "I want Ethan to stay. No more transfers, no more interference. If this is what makes him happy, I'll support it, even if I have to learn how to be his dad from scratch," he said. Sarah listened without interrupting. There was truth in his voice. Exhaustion, yes, but also something new: humility. "It's not about learning to change him, Mr. Carter. It's about learning to see him," she said softly. James looked down and nodded. Max, as if he understood, walked over and rested his nose on James's knee. It was the first time he'd done so without tension. "Thanks," James whispered, and though it wasn't clear who he was thanking, everyone knew it was sincere. That night, the center held a special activity, a walk through the nearby snowy forest, lit by lanterns hung in the trees with the kids and their service dogs. Ethan walked holding Sarah's hand, Max trotting close by. James followed, keeping his pace slow. At a clearing, they stopped. The lanterns formed a circle of warm light in the cold. Sarah gave each child a small flashlight. Ethan held his firmly and pointed it at the sky. "What do you see?" Sarah asked. Ethan paused, then said in a soft voice, "Everything." In that single word, spoken with sweetness, there was more life than in 100 conversations. Max lay beside him, calm. Sarah smiled. It had started as a story of abandonment. Now, it was a story of belonging. Spring began to show in small ways. Tiny buds on grey branches, blackbirds singing at dawn, and a soft warmth in the breeze passing through the Willow Creek Center's windows. It was as if the earth itself was responding to the change growing inside Ethan. He was no longer the withdrawn boy avoiding eye contact. Now every morning, he greeted Sarah with a nod, sometimes even a single word. "Hi. Light. Thanks." His world was expanding, not loudly but with delicate beauty. James Carter started visiting regularly. He didn't push or interrupt. He'd sit nearby, sometimes reading a book while Ethan played, other times just watching. Their moments of connection were brief, but real. Ethan began to accept his presence without anxiety. During one visit, James brought a surprise, a tablet with an augmentative communication program. Sarah had mentioned it, and he'd had it shipped from Europe. The device let Ethan form sentences with pictures and sounds, played back in a digital voice. "It's your voice, in a different way," Sarah told him. Ethan explored it curiously. At first, he just tapped random buttons. Dog, music, outside. But over time, he built sentences. One of the first was, "I want to go to the park with Max." And so they did. One afternoon, Ethan, Sarah, James, and Max went to a nearly empty park. Ethan walked briskly, Max at his side. At a wooden bench, Ethan stopped, lifted the tablet and tapped a sequence. "Dad, play ball." James's heart broke. His lips trembled. He looked at Sarah, eyes glossy, then clumsily pulled a soft rubber ball from a backpack. "Of course, son, of course," he said. They played for nearly half an hour. Ethan didn't laugh out loud, but his face glowed with pure joy. Max barked once, as if cheering them on. Later, as the sun dipped, Ethan sat on the grass and started drawing in his notebook. His style had changed. No longer single figures, but sequences, scenes, emotions. This time he drew a house, a dog at the door, and a family in front. Sarah leaned over and touched his shoulder gently. "Who are they?" Ethan looked at the drawing, then tapped his tablet. "House, Max, Dad, me, everyone." Then, without the device, he turned to James and said in a soft, clear voice, "Thanks for staying." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. It was sacred. James knelt in front of him. He didn't cry, didn't need to. He hugged Ethan gently, carefully, and Ethan didn't pull away. Max lay beside them, resting his head across both their legs. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the guilt, not the words never spoken. Just the three of them, and a silent promise to hold on to what they'd built. Months passed, and summer arrived. The Willow Creek Center celebrated its anniversary with a small ceremony for close families. No grand speeches or fancy decorations, just rows of benches under trees, live instrumental music, and tables with photos of each child's special moments. One table held a picture of Ethan sitting with Max, holding a flashlight in the forest night. Another showed him with his tablet, forming words. A newer one captured him hugging James while holding a drawing. But that day, something felt different. Max, now with more grey around his muzzle and slower steps, stayed calm, though everyone noticed his tiredness. Sarah had seen it for weeks. He ate less, slept more, and sometimes struggled to stand. She knew what was coming, but said nothing. During the ceremony, Sarah was asked to speak. She stepped forward with a folder, but looking at Ethan sitting with James, gently stroking Max's back, she didn't read her notes. She spoke from the heart. Sometimes, heroes don't wear capes or speak. They just walk beside us day after day until we realize we're not the same anymore. And all that happened because of a dog. Ethan looked up. He understood more than people thought. Max, lying at his feet, lifted his head one last time, looked at the boy with those noble eyes that had seen so much, and let out a long, deep sigh as if saying, "I'm done." That night, in his special bed at the center, Max didn't wake up. He passed quietly, without pain, with the dignity of someone who left an everlasting mark. Ethan didn't cry when he heard the news. He stayed silent for a long time, holding his stuffed seal. Then he asked for paper and crayons. He drew Max with wings, a boy and a man waving to him, and a bright sun in the background. James framed the drawing and hung it in the center's lobby. Below it, a simple plaque read, "Max, the friend who didn't need words to change a life." Sarah passed the drawing every morning, smiling with bittersweet joy. She knew Max was more than a companion. He was a bridge, a witness, a protector, and, in Ethan's words, a four-legged angel. Later, Ethan started attending the local school. He still used his tablet but also wrote, not too much, just enough. One of his first essays was a free topic piece called My Hero. He wrote, "He didn't talk, but he listened. He didn't fly, but he saved me. His name was Max, and he's still with me." 2 years had passed since Max's death. The Willow Creek Center had grown, not in size but in spirit. Inspired by Ethan and Max's story, a permanent program was created, pairing children with special needs with retired service dogs. They called it the Max Project. Each year, new families arrived, seeking what Sarah had once searched for, a bridge between their children's hidden worlds and the light they didn't yet know how to reach. Ethan, now 11, lived with his father in a house surrounded by trees, less than 10 minutes from the center. They never returned to the old mansion. James sold it and used the money to fund scholarships for the Willow Creek Center. Their new home was simple, with big windows and a garden where Ethan grew sunflowers. A new dog, adopted with Sarah's help, was now part of the family, a golden retriever named Milo. He wasn't a replacement for Max. He was a new beginning. Ethan knew that. "Max isn't gone," he said one afternoon, looking at the orange sky. "He turned into light. Now he watches over others." James had learned to listen. He attended school meetings, went to Ethan's therapies, and most importantly, stopped chasing perfection. He learned that loving someone isn't about shaping them into your image, but about living in their world. Sarah published a book about Ethan and Max, which became required reading for therapists and educators. She was invited to conferences, but never left the center. To her, it was sacred ground. Maggie, the former nanny, visited Ethan again, not to work, but as family. They welcomed her with hot tea, shy smiles, and colorful drawings. One spring morning, Ethan stepped onto the school stage in front of his classmates and teachers. It was his first time agreeing to present. Using his tablet, he projected his favorite drawing, a boy and a dog walking together. Below it, a sentence he wrote, "Words couldn't find me until a dog brought them back." The silence that followed was broken by soft applause, full of respect. In the eyes of Sarah, James, Maggie, and so many others, there was pride, yes, but above all, peace. They knew this story, which began in the cold of abandonment, ended wrapped in the certainty that true love doesn't shout, it stays. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.